real sport, the champions are usually those that are, the best at it. The biggest, the strongest, the fastest. But pro wrestling is not a sport, it's sports entertainment, pal, and if giving, a robot or a three-legged man a title is going to draw interest, then so be it. There have been some weird and wacky wrestling champions over the years, most of them short-term and done to make headlines. Headlines like, pro wrestling is still stupid lol, look who they made champion now, but headlines regardless. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 most absurd pro wrestling champions ever. But before we start, just to let you know that we are ignoring inherently gimmicky titles like the 24/7 and Iron Man championships. As a general rule, if Jack the Jobber can win it, I'm not going to talk about it. Join us! Number 10, Hervina. After a few years' service, WWE decided to bring back the Women's Championship with a newly designed belt since, Medusa threw the old one in the bin on Nitro. The early days of the relaunched title perfectly demonstrated how women's wrestling was viewed by the company back then, with non-wrestlers like Sable, Deborah, and the Cat winning it. Presented as a joke, WWE had the ancient fabulous Moolah win it from the competent Ivory, and then went on further by having Harvey Wippleman in drag wrest it away from the Cats. Miss Kitty had won the title in classic fashion by coming out on top in a 4-way evening gown pool match, celebrating the triumph afterwards by getting her Jerry Lawlers out. She defended it in an epic chocolate pool bout with Tori, but lost it to Hervina in a Lumberjill Snow Bunny classic. I'm not sure what the point was, because Hervina won the title on Raw and then lost it to Jacqueline later that week on SmackDown. A rib on the road agent? Possibly a punishment for something Harvey did backstage? Maybe someone on the writing team had a weird fetish and wanted to see the former manager in makeup? I do not know, but it was rubbish, and I would like to move on to something else rubbish, if that's okay. Number 9, Eric Bischoff. Seeing the popularity of both ECW in general and WWE's own hardcore title and division, WCW decided to get in on the act in late 1999 and introduced their own Anything Goes belt. It started out well enough, with the likes of Brian Knobbs, Norman Smiley, and the members of 3 Count holding the strap. Wait, hold on for a second, that's not starting out well enough, is it? Anyway, Terry Funk. Now there's a goddamn hardcore legend capable of holding the title, which he did after it had been vacated by Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff in the big WCW reboot in April 2000. The Funker lost it to Shane Douglas for a day and then dropped it once again to the Bish. Look, if I had significant creative influence in a wrestling company, I would probably die while reigning as its world heavyweight champion, and Bischoff isn't the first or last to book himself to win the gold. Their match, such as it was, took place either side of a segment featuring Miss Hancock, Kimberly Page, and Mike Awesome, both men disappearing and then re-emerging from backstage with Funk pushing Eazy-E in a wheelbarrow. Bischoff got the win thanks to interference from Johnny the Bull and Big Vito as, and I'm not kidding here, Terry was preparing to give Eric a stink face. Bischoff then vacated it to the pair of them the next night on Thunder as a thank you. Number 8, Mr. McMahon. Now, there's nothing tough or champion about that pansy WCW exec Eric Bischoff, but WWE chairman Vince McMahon, now there is a hard-as-nails street fighter if I've ever seen one. Bronzed, chiseled, and as intimidating as talking to a girl I don't already know, McMahon looked and acted like one of the stallions who made their livings bending bones in his ring. But as much as he looked the part, Vince was not a wrestler. However, that wasn't going to stop him from winning 2 world titles, starting with the WWE title in 1999 and followed by the ECW title in 2007. The first instance was brief and saw the genetic jackhammer dethrone Triple H with the help of Steve Austin before wisely vacating it. The second, however, went on much longer and was a genuinely commendable troll job. Vince, with the help of son Shane and adopted Samoan Savage Umaga, conspired to take the ECW title away from Bobby Lashley, and rather than give it up, McMahon defended it, first against Rob Van Dam and then Lashley himself, before finally losing it back to the Dominator. If you are a hardened ECW fan, then do yourself a favor and finally admit to yourself that the sight of a do-rag wearing Vince McMahon holding the title was indeed very funny, and you will feel much, much better. Or smash a light tube over your head, whatever you fancy. Number 7, Nicholas. When Braun Strowman won the right to challenge the Bar for the tag team titles at WrestleMania 34, speculation was rife over who the monster among men would pick as his own tag team partner. Would he choose someone from the main roster, like Kane? Or what about someone from NXT due a call-up, a Samoa Joe type? Maybe a WWE legend. I mean, I'm sure one of Papa Shango, Kama Mustafa, or The Godfather was in New Orleans for Access that year. Then again, there was every chance that Strowman would go it alone. After having to wait until the second to last match on a 528-hour show, the WWE Universe finally got their answer when Braun picked out one of their own. Plucking a young child called Nicholas from the crowd, the Little and Large combo went on to win the belts on the grandest stage of them all. Obviously, it wasn't just some random little bastard that was put in a potentially dangerous situation, but the son of WWE referee John Cone. The win made Nicholas the youngest champion in WWE history. Take that, Rene Dupree! But the team relinquished the titles the next night as it would interfere with the young lad's schooling. Number 6, Hornswoggle. History repeats itself, doesn't it? WCW's Cruiserweight division was pioneering from the mid to late 90s, giving excellent performers like Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, and Eddie Guerrero a platform to get over as they vied for the Cruiserweight title. And then it became a punchline, with luminaries such as Disco Inferno, Medusa, and Daphne being booked for runs with it. The same thing happened when the title was revived in 2002. Though it perhaps wasn't on par with the old early day WCW version, WWE's Cruiserweight title was held respectably by Mysterio, Tajiri, Billy Kidman, Chavo Guerrero, and a slew of other talented high flyers. WWE were never fully invested though, and also made some less than credible stars Cruiserweight champ. The whole Chavo Classic Jacqueline saga was regrettable and almost certainly something that was pitched in jest and then took on a life of its own, spiraling out of control. The title managed to regain most of its credibility, but completely lost it when Hornswoggle got his tiny little hands on it. The Leprechaun showed up at the end of the Cruiserweight Open at the 2007 Great American Bash, hitting the Tadpole Splash on Jamie Noble for the 3. He defended it a couple of times against the Redneck Messiah before Vicky Guerrero stripped it from him after it was revealed that Horny was the illegitimate son of Vince McMahon. Yeah, can't have the boss's son putting himself in harm's way, can we? Sorry, Shane. Number 5, Oklahoma. As bad as things were with WWE's cruisers, nothing can really compare to the depths WCW plumbed in their version of the division. I mentioned Disco, Medusa, and Daphne before, but I thought I would reserve particular scorn for Oklahoma. Oklahoma was portrayed by Ed Ferrara, a former TV writer for primarily kids shows who got the job with WWE in 1998 and teamed up with Vince Russo to change the face of sports entertainment as we knew it. Ed and Vince were responsible for much of the toilet humor and car crash TV stunts and storylines you saw during the peak of the Attitude Era, and both were courted by the competition, jumping ship when they secured a better deal to write for WCW. As well as helping tank the company from the writer's room, Big Ed also began appearing as Oklahoma, an obvious and sadly quite mean-spirited parody of WWE commentator and then talent relations bigwig Jim Ross. Mocking good old JR for his love of barbecue and the Sooner State is one thing, but Oklahoma also made fun of his Bell's palsy, which was taking things way over the line. Oklahoma beat Medusa for the Cruiserweight Gold at Sold Out 2000, then immediately vacated it because he exceeded the weight limit. So why was he allowed to compete for it in the first place? WCW, where the big boys play, or WCW, where logic goes to die. Number 4, Goldberg. As we've already seen, both WCW and WWE were more than happy to make a mockery out of their Cruiserweight titles. But even though Ted Turner's organization went through with making Oklahoma champ, WWE may have actually had them beaten because they disgraced not just their Cruiserweight crown, but also the light heavyweight precursor too. WWE reintroduced their light heavyweight title in 1997 as a way to counteract their rivals' flourishing cruiserweight division. There were a couple of bright spots, sure, but the likes of Scott Putski and Flash Flanagan weren't giving Psychosis and his mates any sleepless nights. It didn't take too long for WWE to give up on the light heavyweight title. Taka Michinoku held it for a while and represented it well. Then Rising Star Christian had it for a month, before Dwayne Gill upset the Brood member with his help from the rest of the Job Squad. So, you know, No, they were literally saying the champion is a jobber. But don't worry, WWE had big plans for Gil, just none that concerned the title he now carried, as he transformed into Gilberg and went back to losing matches while failing to defend the title, which was basically forgotten about. Outside of 3 defenses on Sunday Night Heat, Gil did nothing with the title before losing it to S.A. Rios 445 days after winning it. Number 3, Judy Bagwell. By the end of WCW, everyone and their mother had held the title belt. No, really, everyone and their actual mother won a championship because WCW genuinely went ahead and booked the mother buffer herself, Judy Bagwell, to become tag team champion. Judy's son Buff Bagwell and Rick Steiner won the straps at Halloween Havoc 98, but Buff turned on the dog-faced gremlin during the contest, and in the aftermath, Steiner was allowed to select his own partner. He chose Kenny Chaos, because I guess he was in the room at a time a decision needed to be made or something, but then Chaos suffered an injury after one defense, necessitating another emergency partner. Since he was feuding with Buff and the rest of the NWO, including Brother Scott at the time, Rick chose Judy Bagwell to be his co-champion, introducing her on Nitro as the commentary team laughed at how hilarious it all was, and Jim Cornette had an aneurysm, probably. Thankfully, WCW didn't have Judy, work matches or anything, but she was everywhere on television and actually got physically involved, ducking a punch from her son before leveling him with a slap. The charade came to a mercifully quick end when Rick Steiner suffered an injury and the titles were vacated. I'm not one to celebrate injuries or anything, but the lesser of evils and all that. Number 2, David Arquette. WCW may have been circling the drain, but they still had a film in theaters that revolved around their flagging brand. The film, like the wrestling operation, was struggling, so in a bid to drum up interest and cross-promote, WCW enlisted the services of lifelong wrestling fan and Ready to Rumble co-star David Arquette. The association started off innocently enough, as Arquette formed an alliance with Canyon going up against Eric Bischoff. It wasn't good, but it was relatively harmless. Then WCW did the thing that many consider the death knell for the promotion and made Mr. Courtney Cox their World Heavyweight Champion. And this was in a friggin' tag team match on friggin' Thunder no less, teaming with DD friggin' P to beat Jeff friggin' Jarrett and that friggin' Bischoff. Presented as a comedic accidental champion, Arquette was reluctant to wrestle and even tried to give the title back, but managed a successful defense against Tank Abbott, who incidentally was once seriously discussed as a potential World Heavyweight Champion himself. Are we sure at this point that the Millennium Bug didn't affect Vince Russo's brain? Arquette's reign came to an end at Slamboree when he lost a triple cage match like the one used in the film, turning on DDP to give the strap back to Double J. The actor himself deserves no scorn for this, as he was against the idea from the off and, what's more, donated his WCW pay to the families of wrestlers who had suffered tragedy. Number 1, Vince Russo. What, did you think the man was going to book an actor to win the WCW World Heavyweight title and then not script himself to hold the big gold belt too? We're running very close to the death of WCW now, and Russo had gone mad with power while simultaneously running out of ideas. Well, he didn't run out of ideas, he just had loads of really rubbish ones. I mean, I wish he'd run out of ideas. Anyway, Vinny Rue captured the title in a cage match with Booker T on an episode of Nitro. As bad as WCW was in 2000, one of the bright spots was the rise of Booker from tag teamer to genuine main eventer and respectable world champ. Russo was basically one of the most featured characters on TV at this point, and the show was taking place in his hometown, so it really shouldn't have come as too much of a surprise when he beats Booker for the title in a crap match that saw the writer wrestle in football uniform, including helmet, with tons of outside interference and a distinct lack of athleticism. The finish came when Goldberg speared the New Yorker through the steel, resulting in victory by escape. The show ended on a cliffhanger as to if he was really the champ, but it was confirmed on the following Thunder, with Russo vacating the title days later on the next Nitro because he didn't want it. Honestly, the only time I want to hear Vince Russo and Swerve in a sentence ever again is if it also includes the words "only had time to" and "his car into a functioning outhouse."